Good morning, Bourbon Bay. This is Steven, your host with Bourbon Bay Talks. And yeah, so I know it's been a little while. Last couple weeks have been really exciting. We've had a couple tours of a couple really awesome distilleries down here in Tampa, Florida. First one a couple weeks ago with my friends, Gambler Bay Distillery. Had a great time showcasing the malting process, which is the first step in the creation of their malting bourbon, their American malt whiskey. And then this past week, I was actually at Dark Door Spirits or Cerberus Distilleries here in Tampa as well. And I was with Shane Newcomb and Macy Coe, and they showed me a great time, showed me around the distillery, talked about the spirits, and got to know a lot of great information from them. Really great place, and hope to continue to do some stuff with those guys, both Gambler Bay and Dark Door Spirits, and hopefully to have some more exciting and future projects in the works with some other local distilleries and also restaurants in the area that are focused on bourbons or like speakeasy style. So yeah, we'll definitely have a lot planned out for that. And I hope you guys, if you haven't already, definitely go check out those videos. Go check out Dark Door Spirits. Go check out Gambler Bay. They're really great distilleries. And been really great and showed me some great hospitality. So, but yeah, we're getting back, continuing with our history series with bourbon. I have today's bourbon. We're going to have the Bowman Brothers. I know it's a little hard to see, but yeah, this is the Bowman Brothers small batch whiskey from A. Bowman Distilleries up in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And they are the oldest distillery in Virginia, starting back in 1927. And when A. Smith Bowman basically procured 7,200 acres of land in the Sunset Hills Farm in Fairfax County. And basically his farm was set up to be a dairy and granary. And after setting this up with his sons, he had an overproduction of many different grains from corn, barley, wheat. So definitely all the ingredients you need to make bourbon or whiskey at that time. And basically starting in 1934, he started the distillery on the farm, and basically, like I said earlier, with his son's help, he started the production of the bourbon called Virginia Gentleman. And in the 1950s, the distillery was the sole proprietor of the only legal whiskey in Virginia. And then from that point on, they decided to be very innovative and started to create other small handcrafted spirits. And then today, the distillery, I think it was back in like 1997 or they moved to Fredericksburg, or actually in the early 2000s, they moved to Fredericksburg, Virginia, and opened up the distillery there. But they still kind of continue that traditions of making really great bourbons and whiskeys. And in 2016, 2017, the distillery was named the world's best bourbon by the World Whiskey Awards. And so they like to say that they're the world's best bourbon. They're definitely a really good bourbon, and we're going to try some right now. So as always, guys, put down in the comments and let me know what you guys are having. If you guys happen to be having the Bowman Brothers with me today, definitely give me your opinion on it. Let me know what you think of it. I've tried it a little bit before. I thought it was a pretty relatively good bourbon. We're going to smell it a little bit right now and get those nice aromas. So yeah, I kind of definitely get that nice citrus notes out of it. You definitely get a little lemon more on this one, maybe even a little cherry. And then you also get a little bit of leather notes and a little bit of smoky notes. It's definitely very smooth. You only get that little bit of that burn, that little bit of spice in the back end, like right on the back of your throat. You kind of get that spicy notes, and you definitely get a little bit of cinnamon in there, which I'm kind of picking up. But it's definitely very, almost a little bit sweet at the beginning, almost to like where you get a little vanilla, you get that caramel for sure. So definitely a bourbon I highly recommend. Definitely one that I would think would go pretty well in maybe like a whiskey sour, or sidecar. But yeah, so as always, guys, let me know the comments. Oh, and I also almost forgot. Do have a couple of logos that are in the works right now, so I'll probably be putting those on my social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Blogger to have you guys kind of do a little fan vote and let me know which of the logos you like the best. And I really appreciate my friends for helping me out on designing those logos. So yeah, we'll probably be doing that soon, maybe in a couple weeks. I'll definitely let you guys know. So keep an eye out for my social media page. Again, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Yeah, so we can pick out what my future logo will be. And I hope you guys are having a great day right now as we start this lovely Tuesday. And yeah, now kind of getting back into the history aspect of this podcast, like how we love to discuss the history of the bourbons, which really makes everything really unique to the spirit. So I'm going to be talking about like what's in our bottle. And kind of between that time, like the last time I spoke to you guys about the history, where we were in the formative years right before the Civil War happened. This is kind of going back a little bit before the Civil War and actually during the Civil War. Basically there was a lot of popular brands starting to develop for whiskey. Those distillers gained a really good reputation for their product. They were really well sought after bourbons. One of those being, as we kind of discussed in the last episodes, is the Oscar Pepper, who in 1835 built the Old Pepper Distillery, hired James Crowe as the master distiller, and marketed their whiskey as Old 1776. Born with the Old Republic, and the name referred to Oscar's father, Elijah, who settled in Kentucky in 1776 and made whiskey shortly thereafter. So yeah, kind of that first start of the marketing. And this is actually one aspect too, where whiskey was really where you get the term branding. This is where that kind of started to come from, is because what they would do with the barrels is they would, right on the top of the barrel, they would brand in their logos. They would brand their names on the top of the barrels. And that's how we kind of get the term branding from. So that's kind of like, and that was like the first form of marketing in the early 1800s and 1700s. So yeah, this is kind of like where whiskey kind of starts to, it's been influencing our culture, but this is where you see another aspect of how it influences our culture, especially the business community as well. That's better. So yeah, and basically at this time, most of the whiskeys is sold in the barrels to retailers, where they are actually selling the barrels to places like grocers. They were selling it to the bars, and also just local customers. So it wasn't coming in like bottles like you see today, like this, so they weren't coming in bottles like this just yet. And you didn't really know what was in the barrel, other than you just have the brand name on the barrel that told you, okay, this is what should be in there. But a lot of times when it got to the grocers, when it got to your saloons, a lot of those saloon owners would basically take the barrels and to try to stretch the whiskey out further. they would take out the whiskey and basically, put in other ingredients, water, uh, neutral grain spirits, whatever they could do to try to stretch it out. So basically, yeah, I mean, distillers' names could be used to pour their products, but it wasn't at all uncommon from the cheap whiskey to be poured from its cask into decanters that advertised a more expensive product. A bottle exists today, produced in 1848, that bears the word Bourbon and the distiller name M. Beringer or Binger and Company of New York. Binger, as far as we were able to ascertain, was a dealer in bulk whiskey who bottled some of his products, but not until 1870. When the company headed by George Garvin Brown Old Forester, so this was one of the founders of Brown-Forman, sold or sells the whiskey without the only thing as sealed in the bottle. Brown's goal was to assure the public that they would finally know exactly what whiskey was in the bottle. So Brown was kind of one of the first people that decided to put it in the bottles so that people knew exactly what bourbons they were getting. And during like we talked about, during the formative years, business of rectifying, which is what that process I discussed a little earlier, where people would kind of take the whiskey out of the barrels and then they would put neutral grain spirits, they would put water in it to try to stretch it. And that was what was known as rectifying. And a lot of this information I get from the American Distillers Association, a great group, great website to check out. I'll definitely put their link in their website down at the bottom in the comments. Going a little bit further, the most rectifiers were and are reputable wholesalers who bought whiskey from different distillers or at selections of casks from just one distiller and mingled them together to arrive at a consistent product they could call their own. Some of them filtered the whiskey they purchased in bulk in order to rectify it, taking out some impurities and rendering the whiskey somewhat smoother. However, there were yet a third group of so-called rectifiers who had an eye on the fast buck. So yeah, these were the more devious, the more where it started to get really kind of dangerous, and where you just couldn't trust what was actually in the whiskey because, like I said, people were putting other things in it. Some stuff that was actually poisonous. So it was kind of this third group of people that were doing this. So I don't want to ruin the entire rectifier name because there are still people who rectify it where they go and they purchase barrels from distilleries and they go and they mingle that and they create their own little bourbons or whiskeys and they put their name on it after they mingled it or they blended it. So this was that group that was just really interested in making a quick buck, trying to get as much money as they could off of it. And these basically, according to the American Distillers Association, these scallywags blended the small amounts of straight whiskey with large quantities of flavorless neutral grain spirits distilled out at a very high proof in the coffee continuous still, as we had talked about in a previous episode, and basically put a couple flavorings in it and then sold that product as a straight whiskey. So they were lying to the customer at the time, saying it was a straight whiskey when in reality it wasn't. These days, what they produced is called blended whiskey, and we would be remiss if we didn't mention just how good blended whiskey can be. And there are a lot of good blended whiskeys out there, so not to say that there aren't good ones. There are definitely quite a few out there that are really nice. So this was kind of the start of the term blended whiskey, was during this time frame. And not only are there in many cases less expensive than straight whiskey, but the act of blending whiskey has now become an art form and the result in a softer dram that is ideally suited for the use of mixes, with some of the more expensive blends being complex enough to be savored for their own intricacies. And then basically, yeah, but during this time, a lot of the people that were doing this practice were basically, like we had said, were trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes, saying it was a product or saying it was a certain product when it wasn't. So, sorry. And although these rogues were growing more prevalent during the later part of the century, or by the 1860s, they were already at least one book on the market that gave instructions on how to make imitation liquor and wines. This was by no means an uncommon practice. A treatise on the manufacture, imitation, alteration, and reduction of foreign wines, brandies, gins, rums, etc., included instructions on how to make imitation whiskey, such as Old Rye Mongolia, which, of course, like we talked about, was that rye from Pennsylvania, and Old Bourbon. The author of this book was John Stevens, MD, who billed himself as a practical chemist and experimental liquor dealer. Noted that his methods, known as the French system, were almost unknown in this country, and accused previous rectifiers of altering liquors with poisonous and delirious compounds. Stevens' French system of making imitation whiskey, however, was predicted in his book to become a standard method of making less expensive whiskey. There are 3 recipes for making imitation Old Bourbon in Stevens' book. One called for 20 gallons of proof spirit, which is a neutral spirit that was diluted by 100 proof, 5 gallons of pure bourbon, 1 pint of simple syrup, sugar water, and 1 ounce of spirit of nitrate, and some burnt sugar for color. The other 2 formulas use less straight whiskey, but added flavoring such as tinctures of clove and allspice. The book also gives recipes for various tinctures and instructions on how to make the base of the liquor, or the bead of the liquor, calling for the 2-to-1 mixture of virtual or sweet oil, 1 drop of which is sufficient to put a bead on the whiskey. And if you shake the bottle of whiskey, the bubbles that form at the top, known as the beads, are an indication of the amount of alcohol in the whiskey. And the book serves as an indication that the number of cheap whiskeys were being produced just before and in large quantities after the Civil War. A lot of people were out to make a fast buck, and the quality of whiskey was starting to deteriorate. So yeah, this was definitely the time when, even though whiskey was really becoming very popular, it was also the time that the quality and the integrity of the whiskey was hard to kind of tell if it was actually really good bourbon, if it was true bourbon. So this is where you start to kind of see the start of people like the big distillers to see about coming up with a way and lobbying our government to put in safeguards that actually would help people to say, hey, this is true whiskey, because there was a lot of fake or imitation whiskey out there that they were trying to let people know that this wasn't true whiskey and not to ruin the name of it. But I hope you guys kind of enjoyed this story as we kind of get back into the history saga of the podcast. And basically, like I said, we're hoping to have a lot of good things in the future to continue to work with some of the distilleries I've already been in discussions with. And yeah, so looking for a lot better. And if you guys like this video, you like my podcast, please subscribe. The subscribe button is down at the bottom of the screen. And definitely put in some links down at the bottom for this. And also, we'll probably put in a nice little playlist for the history saga as well. And yeah, so if you guys enjoyed, please like, comment, and let me know what you guys think. Always love the feedback. And I hope you have an amazing day. And if you're going to have a drink, have it with me. And cheers, Bourbon Bay. Salud. So, yeah,